It's now my honor to introduce a very distinguished alum as our guest speaker today. Born in Detroit, Mr. Derrick Johnson attended Tougaloo College in Jackson, Mississippi. He received his JD from South Texas College of Law, Houston. After law school, Mr. Johnson completed fellowships with the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, the George Washington University School of Political Management, and the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He has served as an annual guest lecturer at Harvard Law School, lending his expertise to Professor Lanny Guinier's course on social movements, and as an adjunct professor at Tougaloo College. Mr. Johnson is a veteran activist who has dedicated his career to defending the rights and improving the lives of Mississippians. As state president of the NAACP Mississippi State Conference, he led critical campaigns in Jackson, Mississippi that brought $150 million in school building improvements and $65 million towards the construction of a new convention center. As a regional organizer at the Jackson-based nonprofit Southern Echo, Mr. Johnson provided legal, technical, and training support for communities across the South. In recognition of his service to the state of Mississippi, the Chief Justice of the Mississippi Supreme Court appointed Mr. Johnson to the Mississippi Access to Justice Commission, and the Governor of Mississippi appointed him chair of the Governor's Commission for Recovery, Rebuilding, and Renewal after the devastation of Hurricane Katrina. In the wake of Hurricane Katrina, Mr. Johnson founded One Voice to improve the quality of life for African Americans through civic engagement training and other initiatives. One Voice has spawned an annual Black Leadership Summit and the Mississippi Black Leadership Institute, a 9-month training program for community leaders. On December 21st of 2017, after serving as vice chairman of the NAACP National Board of Directors, Mr. Johnson was elected president and CEO of the National NAACP. Please welcome our distinguished alumna, Mr. Derrick Johnson.
Thank you, Dean. Many of you may have seen the news last week at Morehouse College, where Robert Smith, the philanthropist, paid the student loans of all the students. I called my wife this morning just to check in. I'm sad to report that she said not at this time. I tried. To the distinguished faculty, personal privilege to Dean Gina Lewis Singletary, to Professor Shelby Moore, to Dean Helen Jenkins. These are the 3 women that pulled me through law school, because I was one of the individuals who ended up here one of 3 ways. And when I look at the graduating class, I'm sure you fall into this category. You have just achieved a lifelong dream. You prepared many years to get to this moment. I wasn't one of them. Then there was the other group of individuals who you're part of a legacy. You're 2nd, 3rd, and maybe even 4th generation lawyers, that you were expected from your families to be at this moment to continue the legacy of the practice of law. And for some of you who are like me, you stumbled across this profession because you had a college counselor who say, fill this out, take this test, and this is where you're going to go to school. That's where I fell in. To interim dean of Thurgood Marshall Law School, close friend of mine, and the state president of Texas NAACP, Gary Blessel, who's joined us here today, member of the NAACP National Board of Directors, Howard Jefferson, and our local executive director, Yolanda Smith. Just a few of the individuals who joined us today, because like me, I was shocked when I was asked to give the commencement speech. To all the families in the audience, graduates, just know today is not for you. It's for your mother. It's for your fathers, for your grandmothers, and all of the individuals who prayed and worked so hard for this moment. A month after I graduated from law school, someone asked my mother, said, "How was it?" She said, "I don't know. I cried the whole time." Family and friends, but most importantly to the class of 2019 South Texas College of Law, congratulations. Let's give them a hand. When I received a call to consider being a commencement speaker, and I finally agreed, I said, "Dean, how much time would I have?" He said, "Well, just don't go any longer than Aretha Franklin's funeral." That funeral was 10 hours long. And I had both the pain and privilege of being there 8 of those 10 hours. What was amazing to me during the funeral, in addition to appreciating all of her art and her beautiful voice and the celebrities that were in the room, it was the testimony of individuals who talked about their relationship with Aretha Franklin. And they would talk about the type of person she was, that she would find a family in need, and without any fanfare, she would make sure she would send resources to support a family. She would find a home that was burned out, and she would send someone from her staff to go and cover the cost to make sure the family was made whole. She would find out that children had succeeded, and she would, on surprise, show up and celebrate with the children across Metro Detroit. Aretha Franklin, she did all of these things and many, many more. She was a strong supporter of the NAACP, and not once did she ever want anyone to know it. She never wanted recognition. You know, many people define character as the things you do at night when no one's looking. It is who you are. It's a part of your being. It is what your sense of self is about. Aretha Franklin's funeral was so long because she was a person of character, a person who understood that to do something for others is a part of her responsibility. You know, some people have character, some people are characters. That marinate for a minute. And for some of us, as we pursue our passions, we have to make that clear choice. Will we operate with character, doing the things that's right when no one is looking, or would we be seen as characters? Not to be political, if you're up at night tweeting at night, you could be seen as a character. But if you're doing for your mankind, you have character. And no matter what you do, when you leave from this moment, operate with character. The most quietest moment you will find will be in about a day and a half, when everyone who are celebrating your achievement kind of dissipate. And you're sitting in that space when no one else is there but you, whether it's in your bedroom, at the kitchen table, on your porch, and you're going to say, what will I do next? Who would I be? Now what? All of the fear will settle in because you will realize quickly that the 3 or 4 years of you as a part-time student, all you have achieved is a certificate that certifies you functional. It hasn't prepared you necessarily for the practice of law. It certifies that you can start and finish a process within the requisite time, and you can do it to completion in a way in which someone can stamp your certificate and say, completed. Now comes life. Now comes those important junctures. And whether you're a law review and you're going to the large law firm or you barely made it through, now comes life. And your character will be tested. But also this question of ethics will creep in there. This ability to understand the difference between what's right and wrong, not based on some legal principle. I can recall when I finished law school and I went to work for a nonprofit, and it was part legal, part community organizing. We went to this rural county in Mississippi, and the local community there, they were upset because they wanted the ability to elect a school superintendent of their choice. However, in this county, there was a municipal separate school districts, and the residents in the municipal separate district could vote for the county superintendent, but the residents in the county could not vote for the municipal superintendent because that person was appointed. It was me and 3 other lawyers, and we went and we met with this community group, and we took out the easel pads, we put stuff on the walls, trying to figure out the puzzle of how to solve this problem that this community identified. And it was fascinating to me, brand new lawyer out of law school, to watch the process. It was truly community organizing. It gave me a sense of this concept of being an expert, because it was Ms. Doris. She may have finished the 8th grade. She sat against the wall. She didn't say much during the whole time. And she said this, she said, I don't think it's fair that they can vote for our superintendent, but we can't vote for theirs. Basic principles of what's right and what's wrong, what's fair. For us, it was that aha moment, because that's a violation of equal protection of the law. Ms. Doris never been to law schools, but she had the ethics and the willingness to say what was fair and what was unfair. And that's the basis of how we should begin to consider our practice. Sometimes ethics take us away from political expediency. Think about that for a minute. In this current political landscape, where intolerance and racial hatred is germinating across the country, many from your community, in your profession, wherever you decide to land, will be looking for you for direction. Some of you, I hope, will understand the use of your critical thinking skills should not to assist in cementing intolerance, inequity, and unfairness. That you use your critical thinking skills in a way in which you can navigate through a space to ensure that we have an open and inclusive reality where individuals and their talents can be appreciated in ways in which we can perfect this democracy. Ethics require us to not conform to cultural norms. You know, throughout my career, I could always identify the smartest person in the room, and oftentimes it was a woman. Throughout my career, I can always identify when that smartest person is being devalued because they're not being paid the same as the man that's sitting next to them. Is that fair? Is that just? But some of you will be called to use your critical thinking skills to address questions such as that. Ethics require us to stand head and toe above the norm and push through so there can be inclusion. Third point, civility. For some God-forsaken reason, I was invited to be a guest lecturer at Brigham Young Law School. Think about that. I'm neither Mormon, a libertarian, or had no concept of Brigham Young's law school. Second African American to do so. And I accepted, and it was the Orrin Hatch lecture series. I'm neither Republican or a fan of Orrin Hatch. But I accepted, and I prepared this wonderful speech. I thought it was the best speech in my career. I said, I'm going to get them, this is going to be a great speech. And I worked on it, and my wife was laughing at me because I was so intent on getting this speech correct. And I laid it out, and I talked about the loss of civility in our political discourse. This was during a time when Glenn Beck was at the height of his career. And he would go and do this patriotic piece, and as he talked about it, I would watch it every so often. I said, that's not true, that's not true, that's not true, because it was historically incorrect. And I was going to use Glenn Beck as the example of my speech, and 30 minutes before I hit the stage, I stumbled across an article, and I realized that Glenn Beck was a Mormon. What do I do now? So I give my speech and I begin to talk about the loss of civility in our political discourse, and I make the case and I try to use examples without calling the name, and I could see Senator Hatch smiling the whole time, and after everything was said and done, my wife was sitting next to him. He said, "I don't think your husband liked Glenn Beck that much, do he?" And she just started laughing, and he grabbed her hand. He said, "I don't like him either." And we went out to lunch right after that, and I realized that Senator Hatch and I, we have more in common than not. He has 6 kids, I have 5. That has nothing to do with anything. And we actually enjoyed one another's company, but it was a civil conversation, although we could debate and discuss our political perspective in ways in which we can develop an appreciation. The loss of civility is causing us to eliminate the necessary communication in order for us to move this nation forward. And from that time up until his retirement, I've maintained a level of dialogue with Senator Hatch. 2 completely different worlds, starting from 2 completely political perspectives. And yet we could have a civil discourse. It would be the legal minds of this nation, and I'm sure many of you sitting in this audience, to right-size the course of this nation. The loss of political discourse is undermining our democracy as I know it. And many of the political norms that we assume should be in place, they're no longer in place. And we must ask ourselves as a nation, as individuals, as professionals, as lawyers and future lawyers, are we building a nation that we want to see, or are we building a new tribalism? Tribalism has never succeeded in any nation for their prosperity. It is the beginning of the end of any nation. And so I was pleased when I heard Ryan come and he began to quote scripture. So for me, I'm a Christian as well. I grew up in a Black Baptist church. And that day I went to church and read the Bible at the exact same time. I didn't do that often. Sometimes I read the Bible, sometimes I went to church, but do it the same day was something special for me. And I realized that the sermon was the greatest commandment, and the pastor said there are only 2 great commandments, and he directed us to the passage: love thy God with all thy mind and thy heart, and the second part, love thy neighbor as we love ourselves. That's just not a Christian value or principle. That's a universal principle. As I look at this audience, and I know for a fact that we have individuals who practice Judaism. We have individuals who are Hindu and Buddha, and there are individuals who are individuals. But think about that. Loving thy neighbor as thy love themselves. That this nation was built on individuals who started in one place, and over time, through the practice of law, enforcing the question of equal protection under law and equity, that we moved to another place. And that other place allowed me to attend South Texas College of Law, allowed many of the women in the audience to have the opportunity to go to school, allowed many of you to also attend, because race is nothing more than a social construct. It's a social construct to maintain power and control. And as I look at the audience, many white males in the audience in 1920, you wouldn't have been considered a white male. You've been considered male, I'm sure, but not white. Because race is a social construct. If you are of Irish heritage, you wouldn't have been considered white in 1920 and 1930. If you are of Jewish background, you would not considered as white in 1920 and 1930. The only individuals who were considered white during this period of time were white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, meaning that if you practice in the Catholic faith, you would not have been considered white during this period of time. It's a social construct. The use of the tool of otherness is a tool to divide, but yet we all embrace this notion of democracy, of equal protection under the law, and inclusion. Are we ready to use our critical thinking skills to exemplify a level of character, that we loved our neighbor when we deliberate key and critical issues, whether or not we are in a setting as general counsel or counsel within one of the Fortune 500s, or you're practicing with one of the major defense firms or a nonprofit, or you decide not to practice at all. Are we ready to wrestle with the question of what's right and what's wrong and not what's partisan? Are we willing to sacrifice the convenience of companies, of those who want to be in our company, who see the world differently, and yet appreciate that difference so we can grow from that difference? There's not a lot I can tell you about finishing law school and your next journey outside of these core values of civility, of ethical behavior, and character. I'm going to close with a story, because I look like I've bored you to death. I grew up in Detroit, but I live in Mississippi, and I've acquired this love for hunting. I love to hunt. Deer hunting and duck hunting. I haven't hit a thing, and I've been hunting for 8 years now. I climb up in the deer stand, it's so peaceful, and the deer walk under my leg, and I wake up, I say, hey deer, and they keep on walking. I love to deer hunt. And a mentor of mine, he was telling me of a time he went bear hunting. I said, you lost your mind? He said, yeah, when he grew up in Mississippi, rural Mississippi, they used to go bear hunting. He and his best friend, Curtis. He hadn't seen Curtis since the last time they went bear hunting. And they had a rifle, it was an oil rifle, and they spotted a black bear, and they chased this bear. They had 2 bullets, and they shot one, and they missed, and the bear took off running, and they chased the bear. They had the bear cornered, and they took the shot, and the rifle jammed. Oh boy. The bear realized that they had no other shots, and so they became the hunted. And he and Curtis began to run, and he tell the story how Curtis was always a little chubbier than he was and slower than he was, and they split up. And so the bear went after Curtis and not him. And Curtis ran as fast as he could, and he was getting away, and he came up on a cliff, and there was nowhere to go. And Curtis began to wonder, what can I do? What can I do? And the last thing he thought about, he dropped to his knees, and he prayed, Father God, please give this bear some religion. And the bear came up on him, and he was huffing. And the bear pulled a napkin out of his back pocket, and he dropped to his knees. He said, Father God, thank you for the food I'm about to receive. How to tell that story? Because he said, never assume. Never assume your neighbor is so different than you that you refuse to sit down to get to know your neighbor. Never assume that the public policy consideration that's in front of you is what it is said to be on the news. Go beyond the headlines, because your critical thinking skills, you've been trained to go deeper than what's being stated in the news. That the current political discourse, if you unpeel the onion, is all about who gets taxed, who's not taxed, and how those tax dollars are spent. Never assume it's about something over here when, in fact, it's right here. It's about money. And that where some of us have gained this privilege over time because the law slowly began to provide the same protections as all of us, that we need to continue to expand those opportunities and not assume otherness is something bad, and see otherness as an opportunity to grow and learn. In this political discourse, if we lose civility and we stay in that space, that we will continue to erode and subvert democracy as we know it. It is okay to approach the questions from different perspectives. You learn that in trial advocacy. South Texas for many years have been one of the top trial advocacy schools in the nation. We know how to argue both points. So it's not the argument that you should rest on. It should be rested in who are you? What's your character? What's the basic principles of what's right and wrong, and are you able to approach a question from a place of civility? Congratulations to this class of 2019. You will be successful. But your success cannot be measured on how much money you make, although your parents may disagree. It must be measured on, are you creating a future in a society that you will want to see your kids and your grandkids live in? Thank you very much.